series. The title for this morning is Cartography of Old Informs, the New Historical Maps, Revealing Flooding and Liquefaction Hazards in Philippine Cities. I do hope, like me, that you're also excited to hear about this topic. We have a very interesting discussion this morning. Okay, so let me introduce our speaker for this morning. Again, good morning to everyone. Our speaker is a professor of physics at UP Diliman who specializes in developing hardware and software tools for video and image processing. Her work spans multidisciplinary domains such as coral reef imaging, for which she won the DOST prize, or the DOSTP shared R&D prize in 2018. She's also doing cultural heritage conservation, video analysis of sports, and medical imaging. In 2015, she was named as one of the leaders in Innovation Fellow by the UK Newton Fund, one of the outstanding women in nation service in 2013, and was NRCP's outstanding young scientist in 2016. So friends, fellow PASE members, to the audience, to our guests, those here in the meeting room and watching in YouTube right now, let us welcome Professor Maricor Soriano.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, PASE. Now I share my screen. Okay. Can you see my mouse moving?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to introduce where I'm from. Perhaps many PASE members know this place. This is the National Science Complex. And at that corner there is the National Institute of Physics. And if we zoom in, this is the research wing of the National Institute of Physics. And our small laboratory is here. So welcome to visit after the pandemic. So I head the video and image processing group, or we call ourselves the BIP, and this is our tiny logo. And this is how it looks like on a visit day. So I mentor students, PhD, MS, BS, and of course the culmination of our research is the thesis defense. So this is our training. We're training the next generation of scientists. Of course, it's not all hard work. We also like to have fun. So we excel also in cosplay. Okay? Also, and now what we do, we are a very multidisciplinary team because for me, what I want is that we have an immediate impact. Our research should have an immediate impact. So we have delved into heritage conservation, coral reef imaging, video biomechanics, even forensics. Just a brief overview of what we've done in cultural heritage conservation. So we've done work on digital cleaning of Amor Solo painting by using neural networks. So we had samples of clean and dirty parts of the painting, and we were able to digitally restore or clean the painting. So it's, for example, here is the original painting, and after digital virtual cleaning, here is how it looks. Not only that, because this is being done elsewhere, but what we've also done is to visualize the dirt layer, so to speak. So we were able to visualize what was the difference that was removed from the old painting, or rather the dirty painting, and this is how it looks. And this was published in Optics Express. We wanted to work with museums with low income, so we developed tools that will allow them to archive their collections even by using ordinary office tools. So for example, here we show we can take 3D images of heritage objects just by using a projector and a camera. And in fact, we've done this even for outdoors. So this is the Angono petroglyphs. Once again, may I emphasize that these are theses of my students. So we do a lot of field work. So we are physicists, but we go to museums and we go to these interesting places. So here is the setup. You see there the projector, ordinary office projector and school projector and the camera, and of course the laptop, and my student taking images of the rock art in the Angono petroglyphs. So here are examples of 3D images obtained from those carvings, and we can study the profile. The idea is if we can check the aging, because the big question here is how old really are these artworks. So we were thinking, what if we investigate the erosion of the graving marks, and we needed 3D to investigate that. Because of our work on 3D, we were also invited to take a 3D image of the Ticao stone. So these are two limestones found in Ticao, Masbate, bearing baybayin symbols. And this was in between 2011 and 2012. Back then, that stone was still in Masbate, and our anthropologist friends asked me if I could take a 3D, so the other scientists can take a look at the 3D images, even without going to, even if they're not going to Ticao. So here are examples of 3D images we got for some of the parts. The nice thing about 3D imaging is that you can play around with the perspective and the lighting to heighten some details. So here's an example of the perspective changes that you can do with a 3D image. Now, because of all our work with heritage conservation and art, I was invited by a professor in Kyoto University to a collaboration. So they are specializing in digitizing 2D heritage objects. In fact, he has a PhD student and now, of course, Dr. J.R. Toque is a Filipino engineer who got a PhD in Kyoto University under the supervision of Professor Ari Ide Ektesabi, an Iranian Japanese professor in Kyoto. And again, they specialize in creating scanning systems for heritage objects. In fact, J.R. Toque was the one who invented all these mechanisms. Okay? And they donated to my lab one of the scanning systems here. This is Niji. And what you do is you put the paint, because paintings are, of course, very precious, brittle. So you, instead of, one way is, of course, is you can take a picture. But if you want to create a fine image, you can also do a scanning. So this is the Niji installed in the lab. And this is how we take digital images, high resolution digital images of paintings. And we have gone around and offered our services to museums to scan their heritage objects pro bono. So our National Museum always asks us to scan several paintings. So here are my students in the National Museum scanning paintings of H.R. Ocampo in the National Museum itself. So during this time, we were part of the exhibit. So people were moving around in the museum and looking at us and asking us, what are we doing? So we were telling them, oh, this is a scanner. We are digitizing the painting so we can preserve it, etc. And then we can do scientific study. This is, by the way, called a scientific scanner because it's high resolution. It's also highly color accurate, and it also can do infrared imaging. Now, so these are just some of the things we do. And now on to the topic at hand. So the Cartography of Old Informs the New, or COIN, was actually a DOST funded project of mine back in 2017. So when we think about Spanish era or historical maps, we think of something like this, or we envision something like this: hand drawn, not accurate, hand drawn. Okay, so this is Tagbilaran, Bohol. Okay, and however, our hypothesis is this: perhaps bodies of water, fresh water, is a very important resource that cartographers should get it right. So even if the historical maps are not very accurate, at least the locations of bodies of water would be more or less spot on. So why would we want to know the locations of old bodies of water? Well, this research was actually driven by so many uh, uh, extreme flooding events in the country. And uh, if you recall, in Marikina, I think, what was the place? It begins with P. The whole subdivision was flooded because it used to be a floodplain. And when the Ondoy came, the old waterway was inundated because the water used to flow there. Right? So we thought, what if we take a look at Spanish era maps, align them with current Google Maps, and look for lost bodies of water. So in the news, the scientists kept saying that this was flooded because this used to be a waterway. So we said, okay, what if at the same time we can archive or digitally archive the Spanish era maps? At the same time, let's align it to current maps and see if there had been waterways that had been lost. Okay, and so we proposed this project and got funding. So our objectives were the following: to look for Spanish era maps that we can digitally archive. In particular, we will look for maps that have roads, because those roads will serve as alignment points. So the second objective would be to align these historical maps with the current maps using the roads, existing roads, to detect lost bodies of water. And once we have some suspected lost bodies of water, we will validate these sites through site visits, validate the loss of waterways through fieldwork. Lastly, it's important that we inform the stakeholders of the possible hazards. Before we started this project, we actually discussed with few books. Is our idea correct that those lost bodies of water can be flooding hazards? Well, this was what Dr. Solidum said. Not only that, he said, do you know that these old rivers have soft soil, soft sediments, and therefore, if there is an earthquake and the ground shakes, those structures on top are prone to liquefaction. So the ground will experience liquefaction, and any structure on top of these old waterways can uh, uh, can topple. Okay, so we realize that not only are they flooding hazards, but they are also liquefaction hazards. And so we must inform the stakeholders, for example, the local governments, who are the ones who give building permits, such that they will not, uh, or they will discourage, or they will not give permits for buildings on top of old bodies of water. So that was the idea. And so these are some examples of the things that we do. So number one, look for Spanish era maps and digitize them so that it's two birds with one stone. We have a sample for our project. We also digitize and digitally archive these maps. So here's an example. We collaborated with the National Archives of the Philippines. We went around looking for Spanish era maps. And here's an example of 1833 Cebu City map. So here are my staff and students in the National Archives. So they're wearing lab coats. Why? Because we respect the heritage so much that we will protect it from any dirt from. So it's like we're doing it in a lab. We also wear gloves, as you noticed, and in fact. Because of our respect for the heritage, we ask the National Archive staff to move the objects themselves. We do that even for paintings. We do not handle the paintings because we are not trained. Instead, we ask the museum researchers or the museum staff to move the paintings for us. However, during this time, the National Archives staff were so busy because they were transferring to Intramuros. So they said, oh, go ahead and you transfer or move the maps yourselves. That's why my staff were the ones adjusting the map under the scanner. Okay, so here they are scanning some of the maps. Okay. So change detection. So once we've digitized the maps, we will align it to current Google Maps. Our alignment points will be the streets. So it's important that we have streets in both old map and current map because they still exist. And more or less, their geometry is still the same. So all we need is to do a bit of rubber sheet adjustment. Remember, the Google map is GPS based and aerial photograph based, while the Spanish era maps, they were, imagine, it's amazing. From 2D, they project it to 3D in their minds and draw these maps. And so somewhat there's some inaccuracy, but still it's very interesting to see how accurate they can go even without aerial photography. So for example, here we do some image processing to look at the old rivers or old estuaries. This is Quiapo, by the way, and as you have noticed from this old picture, Quiapo back then had several rice paddies. There were several estuaries, tributaries to Pasig River, estuaries rather, Pasig River. But look at the current map now. Now, no more rice fields, and the estuaries some of the estuaries have vanished. And so, once we've image processed and looked for automatically for these waterways, we will overlay them and see where the changes happen. And then once we have detected these changes, we will schedule a field work to these sites and check it out. So here's an example of what my staff do. So they will go to the site where we suspect there are some lost waterways. They will see if it's still lost or maybe it's just not discovered or not seen by Google Earth. They will interview the locals to ask, does it flood here often? How often does it flood? How high are the floods? Okay. Here's an example also again. Okay. And so that's what we do. And then, of course, in the end, we should inform the stakeholders. So we talk to the local governments, the city planners, the city engineers about our results. Now, let me tell you about our results. So here, for example, again, this is Manila. As you can see, this is, I hope you will notice it, this is already overlaid. Right? In summary, this is what we found. There were areas, or rather, there were waterways that have been lost, and they are marked as red. There were actually waterways that are still there, but are not seen in Google Earth. So we marked it here in this map as green. And then there were actually tributary or estuaries that do not appear above ground, so they do not show up in Google Earth, but were actually channeled underground via canals. So here they are in violet. So, by the way, we tried to sample Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. Okay, so in Luzon, we have Manila, and in another area, city in Luzon is Naga. Have a look at this beautiful old Naga map. In the past, Naga was known as Nueva Cáceres. Shout out to all Bicolanos there, okay, who are from Naga. This is Plano de la, I think this is Ciudad, Nueva Cáceres, but it is Nueva Cáceres. As you can see, so again, this is from a National Archives. This is a very tattered map. As you can see, there are many losses, many patches that are lost already, so old, so brittle, but you can see the mighty Naga River traversing. And in fact, there were artificial waterways made. Naga City was the only city where we found a city historian, because what we do is we go to the city, we talk to the local governments, and the local government directed us to their historian. So the historian told us that there was actually a small sort of canal here that leads to the cathedral, the cathedral. And this was used to transport supplies for the cathedral. Okay? So the supplies were transported through this canal here. Interesting. And so this is now how it looks like when aligned with Google Map. Okay? And we will have a look at these locations here, because I don't know if you can see clearly, there are some places here which seem to have some waterways that are coming out of the river. So this is the location. This is Barangay Sabang zoomed in, and this is the aligned map, as you can see here. Okay, here is Barangay Tabuco. And this is what I was telling about. It appears that there are several sorts of ponds emanating from the river, but unfortunately, there's a lot of loss of the map. As you can see, this is all lost. But this is how it looks like when aligned the current map. So as you can see, there are several structures now built on top of this waterway. Right. So again, from the fieldwork of my students, they found actually there were canals still existing. Of course, they cannot be seen by satellite imagery, which Google is based on, because they are hidden. They may be hidden by structures like this. This is a tiny canal. In fact, there is still some canal there. Okay. Once again, here's an example of a aligned map and what it is now. So this is the Naga station. Okay. And here you see the river, and here's the river up here. Okay. So once again, the students, my students and staff interviewed the locals. This was back in 2017, so this was okay. Right? And this was what I was telling you about. This was the small canal, man-made canal, to send supplies to the bishop, to the Naga Cathedral. So in summary, this is some of the things that we found. These are the waterways, or rather the bodies of water that have been lost. And finding a small canal here, this is my staff found that there exists still a small canal along this road, or along this area. Okay, we did not find anything that was channeled underground. Okay. So shout out to all those who come from Iloilo. Here you see a map of Iloilo. And what's interesting about Iloilo is there are a lot. So this is I think this is the Haro River. But as you can see, just like in Naga, some bodies of water emanate perpendicular from the river. Okay? And there were rice fields. This was actually noted as mangroves. And there you have it. So this is Iloilo. I think this is 1893. Okay? So what my staff found when they visited Iloilo was, so this is what was originally in the 1893 map, and it's no longer there. So it's no longer there. But they found several culverts being installed in high flood risk areas. There's another validation visit. So in the old map, in the Spanish era map, there were several waterways going this way, coming from the river, and now they're lost. Apparently, this part is put underground, this part here, and my staff also found several community freshwater wells near the site. Now, these are Spanish era maps. We wanted to find more maps, but the National Archives had to transfer, so they cannot entertain us anymore. So what we did was we looked for several maps online. Actually, we have a copy of this map, but what I showed you of Iloilo is actually what we also found online. So from online, we found the University of Texas Library's Perry Castaneda map collection, and they have several maps of the Philippines in the 1940s. And here, now let me show another city in Visayas, and this is Tacloban. And if you recall Yolanda, no? Tacloban was hard hit by Yolanda. what was interesting was this is a 1944 map made by the U.S. Map Service. So the U.S. Army made several maps of several cities in the Philippines, and now these are aerial photographs, so they are accurate in terms of roads, so they were easy to align. But what was amazing with the Tacloban map was what we see is that in 1944, the central area, used to be a huge lagoon, swamp. But in 2017, it's no more. Okay. So this was fascinating. So when my staff went there, they interviewed people. They discussed with the local government, and they were looking for evidence that this used to be a lagoon in the middle. Apparently, the locals at that when they visited were not aware of that. Okay? And then they, being so tired for the field work, they had lunch in a small Hotel Alejandro. They had lunch there, and my student, while waiting for the food, looked up on the wall, and what she found was a vintage photo of Tacloban City in that hotel where they were having lunch. And in that vintage photo, they saw this area, which seemed to be unoccupied by structures, and which it seemed to be like a pond or marsh or lagoon. So it seems that this is, and the color is sepia, so this could have been a vintage photo back then. Okay. And so they took a photo of the photo on the wall. That's why there's this specular reflection here. But this is evidence in a way that shows that indeed that middle of Tacloban City used to be a lagoon. Now we go to Davao. So unfortunately, Davao was the only city that we got an historical map of, at least for the 1944 maps. So again, the army maps, we found an army map of Davao River, Davao City, and found that the river used to meander like this, but the current meander now looks like this. What happened was this area, part here, had been reclaimed and now are occupied. So here's the Google map, and this is already uh, uh, a residential area, this part here. So let's wait for the GIF to show that this is already reclaimed. People live here. So when my staff visited Davao City to interview the locals, they said even if there are no rains, it always floods in our area. So there is a permanent flooding in this location. And well, no wonder if it used to be if it's reclaimed that it used to be a path of a river. Okay. And lastly, my favorite is our findings in Cebu City. Shout out to those from Cebu. Now, this we found two historical maps of Cebu, 1833 and 1873. Have a look at 1833 map. As you can see, there's this huge body of water that is directly connected to the sea. And then 40 years later, it seems it has closed up. And now there's a lagoon here. And there's a lagoon here. And now in the 2020 map, you see, still aligned with these old maps, this is totally reclaimed. Totally reclaimed. Okay? So, and notice that this body of water in this area is no longer present. And so, in summary, what we found in Cebu City is this. No? So, the estuaries are still there actually. The estuaries are still there. They should have been shown in green. This lagoon in the middle of this location is no longer there, but there seemed to be still a canal connecting it. And there are some things that, some parts of the estuaries that were uh, channeled underground. And there used to be some body of water that meanders like this, but this is no longer seen, okay, from field work. Now, fortunately, I was there in Cebu when the initial data was uh, obtained by my students after image processing. So I said, okay, I will do the field work myself. So since I'm already in Cebu. So I loaded in my smartphone the map of the location where the lagoon was. So this is the location, and I started walking to this place. So this is how it looks like on satellite, and there are many houses, establishments in this area. Turns out it is called Barangay Tinago. So walking towards Barangay Tinago, I noticed that there was a canal. So the canal that was found in the old map, as you can see here, because there seemed to be a waterway here, okay, seems to be still present. So I noted that. Again, it is hidden by houses, so it's not seen by satellite imagery. And then I entered the road towards the interior of Barangay Tinago, where the lagoon should have been. And I saw this. So there are communities, and then it's just a single road with a dead end. So I started interviewing the residents. It has been flooding here. And yes, they said. And when was the last flooding? February, they said. And this was in March. And I noticed that there were canals here, and they said that this is for draining out the water that usually collects there. Okay, and then I started walking some more, and at the end of the road, I found this sign, Barangay Disaster Control Office. And then Cebu City Disaster Risk. Okay, so somewhere there must be, how ironic. So somewhere in this location must be a disaster control office. But there were 3-story buildings all over the place. So I said, which of these could be the barangay disaster control office? And then over at this location, I saw several people wearing the same t-shirt. So I approached them and said, excuse me po, saan po ba dito yung barangay disaster control office or yung barangay? Kami, ang barangay, they said. Oh, ganun po ba? May I make a presentation? So I whipped out my laptop and showed them the results for Cebu, the Cebu map, and told them that, well, actually po, sabi ng PBOX, pag ganito na dating waterway yung lugar nyo, dapat walang uh, uh, several story building. But these were all 3-story buildings. So, and they asked a photo opportunity after I presented. So these were I think the councilors, these were their barangay captain, this was my laptop, I was showing them the map. Okay, then I was explaining to them, because that was part of our objective. Once we have the results, once we've had that, we must explain to the stakeholders the risk and the information. So I was sharing the information there and then. So sabi ko, tingnan niyo po, this, according to this Spanish era maps, this used to be a lagoon. Okay? And ang sabi po ng PBOX, pag dating tubigan tong lugar, or there used to be rivers or water, bodies of water, sediments po to, kaya malambot yung lupa. Kaya pag nag-earthquake, there could be liquefaction and buildings could submerge or topple. And this lady here, the one beside me, okay, oh, sabi ng lola ko, nung bata pa yung lola ko, dito sila naglalaba. And so it was a confirmation that indeed in this location used to be a lagoon. Okay. So yeah. So that was how we did this activity or this project. It ended in between 2017 2018. I presented these results even to just recently to the Philippine Map Collector Society. Okay, Philippine Map Collector Society. So they have Philippine Map Collector Society. So I just recently presented these results to them, and they were very willing to share whatever is it in their collection that they can share, so that even if the funding is done already, we can continue the research. So I also engaged them that if you would be interested, if you have time, some of them are retirees, and so also they can help in looking for lost bodies of water, because this can be done even at home. Okay, so that ends my presentation. In closing, I'd like to acknowledge our collaborators, Gato University, for loaning us the scanning, the scanner, the National Archives of the Philippines, and of course the OST for funding this project. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm now ready for your questions.
Thank you, Professor Soriano, for that very interesting and at the same time very useful presentation. So to those who are here in the meeting, you may want to unmute your mics if you want to ask a question, or you might want to raise your hand. Okay, probably I'll ask the first question. Ma'am, what's the initial response of the LGU or the barangay level, or even the mayor's office regarding your possible policy suggestions or modifications relating to the results of your project?
Thank you very much. It's a whole spectrum. There were a lot of different reactions. Let me tell you some of the reactions. In Iloilo City, when we told the mayor about our findings, ito yung response niya. Oh, kaya pala, because there used to be a building in that location, nakatatayo lang, 10-story building, and after 5 months, it started to tilt, sabi ng mayor sa amin. So baka ito yung dahilan. Okay? So, there in Cebu, in the Tinago Barangay, when I told them na ganito po ha, so wala na tayong magagawa kasi nandiyan na yung mga buildings, pero siguro po pag nag-earthquake, itakbo na lang kayo palabas, ano po. Doon sa lugar na yon, they were a bit defensive. So they say, it doesn't flood here, but no, they're defensive. But in several places, they were very receptive, very open to information. However, this is one of our primary insights. We have taken a look at several cities in the Philippines, all around the Philippines. And the fact that they have Spanish and American era maps means that they are old and well-established cities. However, what if we found that this condominium is on top of an old river? Wala na tayong magagawa dyan, ano? So it's too late. What can we do? So that's the reason why we are still continuing. Right now, my students and I are still continuing to look for these kinds. But now we are targeting places that are at the cusp of becoming cities. Because at least we can still influence their city engineers, their local governments, na please do not give a permit to build on this location because this used to be a body of water. It's too late perhaps for Metro Manila. What can you do? Have them demolish their buildings? Well, it is happening actually that some of our buildings, even for example PGH, it is experiencing subsidence. So this is happening, but it's difficult to do anything anymore in very old established cities. So what we can do is look. So even if the funding is already done, the project is already done, we are continuing our research in the hope that we can catch those locations that may probably still be influenced. The local government can still be influenced to not build anything on old waterways.
Okay, that's good to hear, ma'am. So next question would be from Curvy Alvarez, and then from Julius Liano Jr., and then next would be Guillermo Tavia. So go ahead, you can unmute your mic.
Okay, magandang umaga po sa lahat. Good morning to Professor Soriano. So I'm Kirby Alvarez from the UP Department of History. Just a quick addition, there are a lot of available maps in some online archives that could be helpful in expanding your studies, and in Pares website, in the Portal Archivo de Estatales Españoles, and even in one section of the Biblioteca Nacional de España. So there are a lot of maps.
Yes.
Some of them are cartographic maps. Some of them are topographic plans. Okay, and for example, just a few days ago, I was browsing some of the documents, and it's clearly indicated that some of the waterways in the Malabon Navotas area were still alive during that time, particularly in the estuaries, the what they call this, yung mga saluhan ng tubig in the area, and those rivers and those bodies of waters can no longer be found today, primarily because the reclamation projects in the 70s and in the 80s really damaged the natural water system. So just just a small suggestion. There are a lot of available maps available in the online archives I have mentioned, and we are open to work with you. Okay, some of us from the UP History Department, if possible. So, not only in urban rivers, but also with, for example, with the communities living around major bodies of water, for example, in Laguna de Bai and in Taal Lake. So there are a lot of old maps that can be retrieved in various archives abroad. So thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, and yun po, magandang umaga.
May I react? Maraming salamat po, and thank you very much. We are continuing this. I have 2 students currently working on their thesis to do this, and so I am very eager to get your email. And so if you kindly please chat your email, I will email you and we will start collaborating.
Maraming pong salamat.
Thank you, sir, for that question. Next would be the R&D Chief of PDRI, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Dr. Soriano. My question is basically, you've been approaching the local governments, but has there been any systematic way by which there could be a policy recommendation or maybe a policy influence to that level, more on a national scale? Because we know for a fact that building permits, for example, the building code, even the ones from FEBOX, these are all integrated in a national level rather than normally in a local government setting. So my question is going to that direction. This is a very useful tool, convergence of historical information and tools and scientific tools to be able to get into another platform for disaster risk reduction. But I think when policy doesn't come in very, very soon, it might come out to be a very scattered one. So has there been anything in that direction?
As you heard earlier, we talked to FEBOX about this, and the comparison that we made was this: they already have hazard maps. The hazard map is in the level of regions. So what you can see here is, so for example, map of Tacloban hazard map of Mindoro hazard map. This is granular level. This is a very granular level. It is barangay level. And the reason for that is actually that they need is a granular level. Because, for example, if already the city is built, what can you do, diba? But at the very least, you can mitigate risk. If the location of the risk is only at a certain barangay, at least the focus can be there. So the point of all this is because there are already existing hazard maps, and this was built, of course, out of Ondoy, out of Yolanda, and this has a Brachignoa and all. But we still need something as granular as barangay level, okay? Because that's where the action is. I mean, that when something happens, at the very least, you can tell them, okay, do not build there. So that's why what happens was what our discussion with PBOX was we will share this information with them, okay? But of course, very open to how else we can broadcast this. By the way, this work was featured in what was this? This was, I'm sorry, I'm very forgetful about locations, but this was actually featured in this work was actually featured in a science magazine online. Okay, sorry, look for the link if I find it. But SciDevNet, okay, SciDevNet. So at least this is publicized. And me talking to you, to all of you, is another way of putting the influence out there. Me talking to PIMCOS is also one way, because the members of PIMCOS are very influential people, I found out. So they are owners of companies that build condominiums. Okay, these are rich people who are CEOs of banks. Okay, and so me talking to them, at least these are people with clout, is one way of spreading the message. But I would really welcome suggestions how else we can turn this to policy. But this is our own contribution, meaning barangay level is our contribution because there are already larger, higher scale maps of hazards.
May I say something? Very personal. May I say something?
Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. Remember the controversy about Marikina Valley Fault? For the longest time, people were asking where exactly is the fault. And it was the real estate developers, the group that really fought the government about releasing the maps. What happened when we were, and this was already in 2000, okay. Before that, we were already planning to build a house, okay. But our house is in Philinvest, which is very close to the fault. There were two maps, unfortunately. Magkaiba. Kaya lang they are the two, maps within PHIVOX, There were two maps, magkaiba, but the fault is 100 meters. Ang difference is about 100 meters. That time, buhay pa si Punong Bayan. So, pinunta namin si Punong Bayan. He was favoring the one map. The mga kalaban niya sa PHIVOX, we were favoring the other map. But anyway, sabi niya, your lot is somewhere in between. So 50 meters from either way. Well, anyway, with that, and he said, yung earthquake na yan is 5 meters, you're safe beyond 5 meters. Okay, so 50 meters, you're okay. So you can build your house, something like that. Just, there is the structure. Ang kalaban mo na, protection mo dyan is a good structure. Okay, so it becomes an engineering problem rather than a hazard problem. Okay. So exactly that's what we did when we planned our house. We made sure that the engineers knew what is at stake. Okay. Later on, they released the map. Finally, after so much wrangling with the realtors, they released the map. And guess what? The fault is two houses beyond us. I mean, away from us. Two houses away from us. The edge of the third lot.
Ay, ma'am, nawawala yung audio nyo.
Meron that time there was already a decision to release it, but it was fought so hard by the realtors, and it took a long time for the local government, for the DILG or whatever, to really finally release it. Ang laki ng away dyan. And I'm sure some money changed hands. So anyway, na-safe lang kami because of that. But imagine our neighbor when she found out. It's along her wall. Na kanyang bahay. But she was not 5 meters away, yung kanyang construction. And she did not know. So, yung kanyang structure, ewan ko kung paano. So, that's my story with respect to this. In this case, it's a fault, not a waterway.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia, for that sharing. Next would be Professor Emeritus Tabias.
Thanks, Michael. So I just want to say, of course, that was a very nice presentation, Dr. Soriano, Maricor. I'm just gonna, make some comments about being a non-historicist. I've been doing a lot of flooding on my studies, and the problem always with the developments over time, over space, you cannot avoid, modification of your waterways or your land use. In fact, that's a problem with the planning nowadays of cities. In fact, if you look at it, Manila is on a swampland, just like Pasag Delta or Pampanga Delta, but you build a city nonetheless. So that's an issue. So then if you modify a city, how do you plan it out? Not from a historical point of view, but from a evolutionary point of view. 50 years from now, 10 years from now, what happens? The flood structures, if you want to build that engineering-wise, or if you base it on nature-based solutions, maybe you do this, you do that. But definitely, how do you compromise with socioeconomic development, and then people maybe modifying, the landscape, so to speak? For example, in Palo Leyte, they build even the municipal hall and so on near the coast. When 10 years, when was that? Yolanda, 6-7 years ago, already flooded that area, and then they still build. And then when I asked them why build there, because they said if they build in the mountains, that's where the Philippine fault is aligned. So they don't want to build there. So they have no choice but to build near the coastal area. But then you have this flooding. So how do you compromise accordingly, such that you have the risk of the earthquake, and then you have the risk of the debris flow, landslide like Hormone, and so on. But where I'm coming from is that, like, for example, in the case of Davao, you show the meandering river, and I know because I come from Mindanao, they already built flood walls. So you have already locked in the meandering alignment. Of course, maybe before, when that was like a rice field and so on, the meandering would have been migrating here every 10 years, or if there's a big flood, the meander will swing this way or swing that way, which is a characteristic of meandering rivers. But then you couldn't find it now. So definitely, if you have big flood, instead of the energy will go through that, because of that sort of the alignment and the wavelengths of the meandering river, it will now spill over one side or the other side. Depends on how you do it. But like, for example, talking about Cagayan de Oro, for example, you build the land right in that same swamp land. Limkitkay, Centrio, they built it. You might be interested because I went to high school in Cagayan de Oro City. That was all swamp land. And then every time there's high tide, it floods all the way to that Lapasan Highway, all the way to that Cogon Market. And now you have these big malls and so on. So the question is, how could you really influence? And I think that was an issue earlier. So I think it's the city planners or the developers and so on, I think it's a very massive coordinated effort to do all of these things. Comprehensive land use, you do simulations, what happens in the next 10 years or 50 years. If you build this one, we know the historical floods, and that's where we can base historical storms, that 50 years ago, 100 years ago, we already have this so much, but now you modified your land. What will be the impact of that? And so on. So, well, yes, it's nice to look at the historical topography, but it's so difficult to undo. As you mentioned, maybe some of the subdivisions, they already obliterated the river. In Taguig River is gone, and so on. I think Professor Ando Zaringan had shown that one. And so many other rivers in Butuan, it's gone, and so on. So I would say it requires a really massive effort. Government, stakeholders, developers, and to be really aware and be convinced about, if you do this, what happens? If you do that, what happens? I think that's the only way to realize. And that's where I think science, simulation studies of these different scenarios in the future, visioning what we want to do. Otherwise, it's so difficult to just talk to barangay. When the big developer comes in, the barangay will be bought out. You put a big mall. And I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tabios. I'll be reading some comments from the chat from Moses Alcala. You might want to expand the work and collaborate with Bureau of Mines or FIVOLCS regarding taking it one step further, conducting soil borings at lost areas to identify potential liquefaction risk zones. And a question from Nathan from TIP, how is it possible to integrate with local maps produced in line with a comprehensive land use plan?
Sorry, let me read that because.
Or
Again,
is it
please.
possible to integrate? Is that the question? How is it possible to integrate?
How integrate this with the local maps produced in line with the. Okay, so remember, we're just doing image processing and validation. So of course, any guidance, just like what Emeritus Guillermo Tabios has given, is much welcome. So you tell me, because we can only produce the results. We can tell you the stories and we can show you the evidence. But I am not a policymaker, no experience on that. So I can only give the results. So if somebody here has information how this can, at the very least, I've given this report to PBOX. So if somebody can tell how else we can push this information, because apparently this is, if we want influence to influence in a bigger scale, we have to push across several stakeholders and decision makers.
Thank you for that answer, ma'am. Next would be from Desiree. Sorry. Great research work and presentation. Kudos to the whole team. Science works. I support turning your research into science-based policies and implementation. And the question is, are there engineering solutions to already existing structures, built-in bodies of water? In case of UP Manila and PGH, can UP build in its other campuses the equivalent of UP Manila PGH?
PBOX also said that. Actually, it's very similar. What they said was very similar to what Emeritus Tabio said, that there are already engineering solutions for if you are planning to build on top of, say, for example, soft soil. So there are already engineering solutions. But what we saw in Yolanda was that the solutions there were only for a certain range of, for example, wind speed. It was not known then that they could have 300 kilometers per hour, right? So it's getting extreme. So that's why things have to change. Some policies need to change.
Quick comment, Michael, if you don't mind, to
Go
add
ahead.
to Maricor's comment. Yes, you're right, Maricor, where a lot of times we do some sort of maybe quick and, sometimes cheap solutions. So we're already thinking, what is the impact of that, or what is the effect of that, or benefit of that in the next 5 or 10 or 50 years, something like that. And that's where we really have to evaluate the performance of whatever we do, whatever we plan. Because definitely, like as mentioned by Desiree Hortia, where if you already build that one, maybe, I don't know, if you have to decommission or remove it if there's no way to retrofit, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. They put some support to stop leaning, because that was built it was a coastal area before, all the way to the Pisa, in other words. So something like, but definitely I think what's important is that whatever we do, we should properly really evaluate what will be the benefit of that in the future. Because maybe we're not able to see it now. And that's where science-based studies, due diligence comes in. Otherwise, it cannot be like, oh yeah, we want to do this and so on, without really thinking what happens. That's why we always think about sustainable development. 150 years, 200 years from now, what happens? And fortunately, you have the maps, which are 200, 300 years ago. If that was known, then maybe we should have planned that, oh, we don't build here and so on. Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Hello, sir. Can I
Any,
ask a question? Can I ask a question, sir? Alan,
Go ahead, Sir Alan from TIP, Civil
uh,
Engineering. Go ahead.
good morning, Dr. Maricor Soriano. It was really a very nice presentation. I was involved with the Manila Cavite Coastal Road Reclamation Project before. We started there, and I just would like to know what is your stand on areas where those were the sea before. It's the front in along Manila Bay. We are reclaiming 20 hectares there, and that's why we have Mall of Asia right now. I just would like to know if that's part of your studies, and what is your stand if we have like that as as we progress, and we need to have more space for the population, and so people really have to think where we can extend our spaces. Thank you for that.
Okay, so well, what I understand now is that it has to be very comprehensive when a decision is made. For example, reclaiming land. Of course, every stakeholder must be on board. Okay, um, because you're right. It's needed. Sometimes we need more land, and perhaps the solution is reclamation. But what happened in Dumaguete, the stakeholders were not consulted, and the information with the mayor was wrong. Like there was nothing that there was actually coral reefs there in that location that can be helped. So the thing is, uh, development, it's important, yes, indeed, and this is actually, balancing act. Uh, Something has got to give, or something has to be sacrificed for something else. But eh, so long as all stakeholders are on board and are agreeing, uh, then the policy or the action should move forward. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay,
Oh, by the way, Michael, you're from
we can
UST,
have
right? Michael,
Uh,
Michael, Michael Benjamin Francis.
yes, ma'am.
You're from UST, right? I would like to
Yes.
comment.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Do you know? Do you know that we held a conference there in 2012 in UST at your museum, and I was amazed to find that that building behind you. I think it was 1910, right? Was it built around that time? The building behind
the
you.
main building itself, the main building.
That was one of the first earthquake-proof buildings in the Philippines. That UST building there behind you. I mean, in your background.
Yes, I think it's made from smaller structures. That's why it can withstand such a movement.
So
So
it was ahead of its time during
it's great.
in the time it was built.
So any other
Yes.
questions?
Yes, please, pwede.
Go
Yeah,
ahead,
I
Sir Ramon
have,
Cabral.
I'm, my name's Ray Cabral, I'm a geologist, so I do a lot of remote sensing and geomorphology. Now, first question, do you just look at the waterways, or do you look also at the associated landforms, like, for example, deltas? Like, if I take the example of a Laguna Lake, so aside from the man-made channel, the Pindan Channel, we have three natural rivers linking Laguna Lake with Pasig River. Now, if you look at two of these rivers, you have deltas on the upstream side, on the lake side, so at the mouth of the rivers, and not at the downstream side. So it means that during recent geologic time, Marikina River was already flooding, Pasig River was backflowing into Laguna Lake during quaternary time. So yeah, that's my question. So do you look only at the waterways, or do you look at associated landforms like deltas?
Uh, Only what the images tell us. So we only look at what we, because remember, please, I'm an image processing expert. So I'm looking at pictures and only from pictures. So of course, that information is interesting, and I would welcome if an expert like yourself can give in more inputs regarding what we found and what we can find in the future.
Yeah. Second question: have you tried looking at Nueva Ecija? Do you have old maps?
We tried very hard to look for historical maps of places. We do have a catalog, and I don't know. We have seen several maps because part of the first part of the research was really looking around for these maps. So we went around museums, libraries, archives, online to look for as many old maps with roads, because those are our alignment points. We have a list. I don't remember seeing Nueva Ecija in the list, but
Yeah.
if any of you here do have information or can give me a lead on maps, on old maps, even 50-year ago map, it's still in they do still bear interesting information about lost waterways, even just 50 or 60 years ago. I do please email me, jing at
Yeah.
nitupd.edu.ph.
Okay. Well, the reason why I ask is because Nueva Ecija is very interesting. We have abandoned meanders in Nueva Ecija, and if you look at the aerial photographs, that's exactly where many houses are located. The houses follow the abandoned meanders. And I think it's because if these are very young abandoned meanders, well, at that time, these were still untitled land. Kaya doon nagpuntahan yung mga tao. Kasi hindi sila titled.
Mm, interesting.
Yeah, third question. Kailan nyo digitize yung spolarium?
We need 3 million for that.
Thank you.
We've already estimated the grids that are needed, or the materials that are needed.
So may plans na talaga.
Tagal na po, 2012 pa. But again, our collaborator, so Dr. J.R. Toke, please remember that name. He was the one who built the NIJI, and he actually built several more scanners of different configurations. So since we are collaborating with the National Museum asked him to give a estimate how much it will take to scan the whole spolarium, and he gave an estimate already. So the ball is in the National Museum's court. We need 3 million.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting.
Thank you too for your information.
Okay, next would be your work could use drones, which could make surveys much quicker and easier. Just a thought from Moses Alcala. Any other? Yeah, so we don't have any questions in our YouTube channel, but any last questions or in this meeting room?
Giselle here.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, Maricor. Just curious, you mentioned forensics. So I'm just curious, to what extent are you involved in art forensics? Art,
Oh yes,
so
art
fake
forensics.
art. Yes.
we
Tell
we
us
have
about.
we have actually been asked by National Museum to investigate some allegedly made by H.R. Ocampo paintings. So we've done a bit of work, but it's inconclusive. You see why? You know why? Because when dealing with art forgery and finding out if an artwork is fake or not, you need a huge example of authenticized work or authentic works by that artist, and also a huge example of fake works that are also authenticated to be fake. Unfortunately, there are not many who will admit that they own a fake painting. So for example, if I'm a collector, I bought this painting for X millions, only to find the fake. You know what? All around the world, collectors are suing scientists when these scientists tell that, okay, your Pollock is fake. This has happened to some physicists in the U.S. And it turns out it's happening. So of course that's the problem, ma'am. Uh, in some European museums, they do have a collection of fake paintings. So their museum researchers can study what are the signatures of fake paintings versus the authentic paintings. The difficulty is getting a collection of fake paintings attributed to an artist. Apo. So hindi conclusive yung result namin because there are not enough data, not enough collectors willing to subject their paintings to study.
Thank you. I appreciate the problem. Thank you.
Sir, one last question, sir.
Go ahead, Sir Alan.
Okay, ma'am, you're talking about liquefaction also. Are this potential for liquefaction of the soil evaluated already?
Hindi ko po alam sa PHIVOX.
Okay, all right. Okay, ma'am, thank you. I thought it's part of your it's just like a parallel work while you are doing it, and you also do evaluation for liquefaction potential. Thank you.
We're planning to make a part 2 of this project involving more experts outside of physics. So maybe if you're interested, because for example, the people from the Philippine Map Collection Society are interested. Now I see that history, Dr. Alvarez is interested. So maybe you would be interested to join as well. So the idea is to craft a phase 2 of this research.
That's good to hear, ma'am, that you're extending or inviting the scope, or you're inviting other experts to join in the next phase. So there are no more questions in the chat box, ma'am. Any final words regarding your topic, or what do you want to convey to the public about what your work is?
As I said po, maybe it's too late for old cities that already have some establishments, because it's difficult to tell them that could you move your building to another site. So that's why we are looking at locations or areas that are at the cusp of development, hoping to be able to influence them. The research continues even without funding, because some of these things can be done at home. Even at this pandemic, for those in the US, we are still not allowed to have students go to the lab or go to the university. So my students and I are doing research at home, but this kind of research is something that can be done at home because you have your digitized maps and they can do the processing at their own desktop. So thank you very much for all your inputs. They are very well taken, and I hope I can contact some of you if ever phase 2 starts rolling. And thank you very much for your kind attention and questions and suggestions.
Okay, so let's thank you, Professor Maricor Soriano again. So let us give her a virtual clap. So the topic was not only interesting, full of insights, and very useful, and at the same time, I think the next phase would be exciting, not just for her group, but to other civil engineers here, experts in flooding, geologists. So thank you very much. And to everyone watching in YouTube and with here in the meeting room, thank you again for joining our webinar. This is again sponsored by PASE, the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering. And we say that agham at kaalaman para sa bayan. So this is your host. My name is Michael Francis Benjamin from the University of Santo Tomas, a PASE member. You can just call me Benja. So we hope to see you again in the next webinar. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, PASE members. Thank you, colleagues and dear friends, fellow researchers, and faculty members. Good day and take care and stay safe, everyone. Bye.